Good evening, everybody. My name is Sandy Capilla, and I am Customer Director at the Rural Payments Agency. So welcome to the webinar today, which is about payments, agreements and capitals. Most of you know the pilot is our first chance to test ideas, and a critical aspect of that is to get your feedback on what works well and what doesn't. Today's session is the second one of these that we've run this week. I picked up some of the feedback on yesterday's session, so I'm going to be measured in the way that I run through the presentation, and we'll cover that in a second. And I'm joined by members of the RPA and program team. So we've got a good range of expertise. Much of what we're going to share today has already been shared with you through some documentations. So we'll do a presentation followed by a Q&A. Actually, next, please. And that covers what we're trying to achieve in the time that we've got this evening. Thank you. Before we move on to the main presentation, I'm just going to hand over to Liz to do a bit of housekeeping.
Fab, thank you, Sandy. As mentioned, just a few housekeeping notes. So this webinar is for Sustainable Farming Incentive Pilot participants, and you won't be able to unmute yourself today or put yourself on video, but anything you do need to ask, let us know using the Q&A button. And following feedback, we're looking to change how we do webinars in the future to hopefully allow video, so at least we can see each other, which I think is really called for. We won't need to use the raised hands or chat buttons, just the Q&A button. Next slide, please. As Sandy mentioned, we've sent you some information already about payments, agreements and capital items. If you've missed any of these, please drop us an email and we're more than happy to send them over to you if needed. And just when you close the Zoom, there is a brief pop-up survey, and it really helps us with a quick bit of feedback on the webinar so we can make it better for you next time. And if there is any reason you need to drop off, don't worry, we're recording this webinar and we'll be sharing it with you shortly. And if you do have any questions for us, do email us at ruralpayments@defra.gov.uk, and you can add Sustainable Farming Incentive Pilot to the header of your email so we can quickly act on it. Next. So the Q&A button is at the bottom of your screen. We hope to answer questions before they're even asked through our presentations. If you're able to put in front of your question if it's relating to payments, agreements or capitals, that's really useful for us. The Q&A can get busy, so apologies in advance, but it does help us answer them just with those couple of words, so we're able to sort them and be able to make sure we have the right answers for you. We'll run through the answers at the end of Sandy's presentation, and any questions you have, if we're not able to answer them in the webinar or even just small quick questions, do feel free to email Rural Payments as mentioned before. So thanks so much, and over to Sandy.
Thank you. Next, please, Michael. So we're going to begin with payments. So the payments that you'll receive are basically two elements combined together. That is payment for the actions against the standards that you've selected within your agreement, and the pilot participation payment for undertaking the learning activities. The total annual payments that you'll receive is divided into 4 installments and paid to you once every 3 months from the start of your agreement. It is essentially a single combined quarterly payment for both elements. And you don't need to claim on this quarterly payment. We'll issue it automatically using the information that we've got. There will be a need to complete an annual declaration, but there'll be more information on that in due course. Next, please. So one of the things that we've had questions on is the frequency of the payment. So you'll see from this particular table that if your agreement starts on the 1st of November, then the first quarterly payment would have been made last month and every 3 months thereafter. So that schedule gives you a broad outline of when payments will land into your accounts midway through the relevant month. We'll send you a remittance advice when we make your payment. It will it'll be into you a few days after the payment's been made, and it will show a single combined payment of the standards and the participation payment. Next, please. On the back of some work that was undertaken by the department on a review of countryside stewardship payment rates, the policy teams applied that principles to the pilot actions, and following that review, some pilot payments for actions have increased, some have remained the same, but none of them have decreased. If the payment rate for a action in your standard has increased, it will apply from the start of your agreement. Now, in order to help you understand that, you should go into your agreement and generate and download it to give you an updated version, which I think will be helpful. Next, please. We're still working on the final handful of applications. So if you haven't received your agreement offer, we've recently written to you to give you a named contact to resolve any outstanding issues. If we've asked for some additional information to help us do this, I'd be grateful if you could provide that as promptly as possible. If we've issued your agreement offer in Royal Payments, but you haven't yet signed it, I'd be grateful if you could review it and sign it as soon as possible. Obviously, your agreement cannot start until this is undertaken. Once your agreement starts, your first quarterly payment, as I mentioned earlier, will be made 3 months after the start date. Next. Okay, that's the section on payments. Now we're going to move into the agreement side. So we've had some questions around how people are able to make amendments to their agreements once they've been offered. You can amend your agreement every 12 months from its start date, so basically annually. And you can do that by either adding or removing land, adding or removing standards, increasing or decreasing the ambition level for a standard that's already in your agreement. The amendment will apply from the start of the next full year following your request. We won't apply it retrospectively unless there are exceptional circumstances. If your agreement value reduces because of the amendment, for example, because you have removed a standard or decreased your ambition level, you won't have to repay payments already received for earlier agreement years. Next, please. You can amend your agreement during what we're deeming an annual change period, and the timing of this is dependent upon the start of your agreement date. So, for example, if your agreement started on the 1st of November, you can request an amendment during the period from the 1st of August this year to the end of September this year. This allows us to update your agreement and make sure that the amendment takes effect from the start of the next full year, if the request is accepted. Your agreement will still continue to run for 3 years from its original start date, and we've published more information on the timings of this annual change period and how to request an amendment on gov.uk. Next. We recognise that you may need to end your agreement before its 3-year duration. You can ask us to do that at any time, but if your agreement ends midway through an agreement year, you will have to repay what we've paid already for that year. We won't ask you to repay payments received for an early agreement year, as you have already completed the activities for that period. Next. The next section is capital items funding. So there are 2 types of capital items funding available. We have a specific SFI pilot CS capital grants and the generic 22 countryside stewardship capital grant scheme. So the first one is obviously for land being used for the SFI pilot, and the second one is for land not being used in the SFI pilot. This particular session will purely focus on the CS Capital Grants SFI pilot. Next. Essentially, the capital items funding is available to help you undertake actions for the standards in your pilot agreement. Initially, there are 28 items available. Some of the capital items in the pilot have more flexibility in their use and location than under the main CS Capital Grants offer. Pilot applicants will be able to access funding for some capital items which are only normally available in higher tier or woodland creation grants. Next. We had some questions yesterday around the policy in terms of what we've chosen for capital items. And essentially what we've done is based the SFI pilot capital process on the existing countryside stewardship processes, as we knew that those capital items were popular in CS and supported a range of environmental outcomes. During the development of the initial 8 standards for the pilot, we worked with a range of people to identify items which would be the most suitable to help deliver the environmental outcomes of the standard. As part of the pilot learning, we will look to see if there are additional capital items that could be added to the standards to deliver environmental outcomes, which resonates with what I said earlier around us learning from this particular process. As we develop additional standards for the pilot, we will also include additional capital items to the SFI pilot capitals offer. The intervention rates for SFI pilot capital items match those in countryside stewardship. Intervention rates ranging from 40 to actual costs. Where it is assumed that the farmer gets some advantage from the capital item, e.g. fencing, we will not look to recover the full cost. Most intervention rates are around between 70 and 80%. Capital items that require advice or guidance, for example, catchment sensitive farming offer approvals, are not available as part of the SFI pilot capital offer at the moment. Next. I think we've had a question already in the Q&A around T4 and T1. So if your pilot agreement includes hedgerow standards and you'd like to apply for capital items funding to plant hedgerow trees, T4 only, that is currently available. We will be adding TE1 before the end of this month and we'll write to you when it's available. You may want to consider waiting for this to be available before you submit your capital items funding application, as you can only submit one application in a calendar year. You can, however, submit an application every calendar year across the length of your agreement. Next, please. How to apply? Most people will be familiar to this. You can apply using raw payment service. As I said a moment ago, you can only submit one capital item funding application in a calendar year. There isn't a closing date for applications. And if we need to implement one, we'll give you at least 6 weeks notice of that date. The application is similar to the CS Capital Grants offer that may be familiar to a number of you. This capital items agreement will be separate to your SFI pilot agreement and will have its own terms and conditions. You can access the capital items funding via the environmental land management area on your business overview page on Rural Payments. And like normal, you can email or post supporting documents to us, for example, maps identifying the items you're applying for and their location. Next, please. In terms of guidance, I would urge you to read the CS Capital Grants Manual supplement along with the main manual itself to help you search for Sustainable Farming Incentive Pilot on gov.uk. You'll need to identify the land parcels and they need to be linked to help you deliver your pilot standards. And as it says here, they can be located on land parcels in your agreement, eligible, arable and improved grasslands, which isn't in your pilot agreement, but is being used for the farm woodland standard option. You need to check your permissions. That's really, really important. You'll need countryside stewardship application to submit permissions before you apply, but you can give permissions for someone else to apply on your behalf. Next, please. If your application is successful, as I said earlier, we'll offer you a 2-year standalone CS Capital Grants agreement. This agreement will be separate to your SFI pilot agreement. Once your pilot agreement starts, you can begin with your capital items work, including ordering materials. To note that anything you begin before your agreement starts won't be eligible for the capital items funding. We're aiming to process the applications as quickly as we can. We know it's important your agreement starts quickly so you can get on with delivering the standards. Next, please. Okay, we are now done with the main presentation. I'm hoping you found that overview helpful, and we're now going to go into the Q&A, but I'm just going to pause for a moment to get something, a sip of water. Okay, brilliant. If we go into the Q&A. So how we're going to do with the Q&A is we're going to start off with the payment side. We're going to then move on to the agreement side, and then we'll finish with the capital side. So just reading through the questions quickly. Actually, let me go through some of the answered ones. I think that may be helpful. Actually, panel, can I just ask a quick favour? Can people just reach out or just on the payment side? I'm struggling to find questions on the payments one.
Hi, Sandy. Yeah, we've got a lot of questions about capitals, but so yeah, you're right. It might be quite difficult to see. If there are any, we will shout. Someone's asked, will we be notified when our annual change period is?
So I think the annual change period will be subject to your start date of agreement, as we said in there. I think if the feedback is it will be helpful to prompt people to say you're entering into a change period, then actually that's something that we can take away, Liz.
Sandy, we've got a question about the pilot participation payment and when that's paid. I think we may have covered it, but just to reiterate that the pilot participation payment, which is £5,000 for the first year in the pilot, will be paid in equal instalments. So you should, if you've received your payment in February, you should have received your first instalment, your first quarter of the pilot participation payment of £1,250.
Thanks, Louise. So just to confirm, the quarterly payment includes an element of the participation fee plus the payment for the standards of the work or the actions that you're undertaking in the standard. So yeah, that will be part of that. Thanks, Louise. Louise, I'd say there's a question for David and Caroline about the £5,000 and it being taxable. I think the entire payment is made on the basis of what's in the agreement offer, and I think it should be subject to the standard tax that you would pay in terms of any income that you would get on existing schemes. I don't think there's a special tax treatment for this.
Yeah, that's correct, Sandy.
Okay, I can't see anything more on payments.
We've just had one more come in, Sandy. How quickly will the payments be made? Oh, it moved.
On capital items.
After we've completed the work and lodged a claim, please.
Lisa, do we have an answer on that one?
Yes, so I will, so it will be subject to the normal CS turnaround, which I must admit, I don't know off the top of my head. So I will take a look and then and post that.
So Lisa, just introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry, I'm Lisa Aplin. Let me put my video on. I'm Lisa Aplin and I'm one of the operations leads from RPA. So yeah, I will double check that and come back to you.
So on counter-intuitive capitals in particular across 2021, I think most were paid on average within 30 days of the eligible application being submitted. So as Andy's just said, yes.
Sandy, we do have some farmers that are saying that they haven't been paid and were expected to be paid in February. Should we tell those farmers which is the best email address for them to get in touch with?
So yes, Louise. Actually, I've put my email address in the chat, but actually either they can email me or they can email the email addresses that we'll have at the end of the presentation.
Thank you.
Lisa, I don't think we're aware of anyone that was due a payment that hasn't had it yet.
No, we've paid everybody who had a 1st
of November
start date. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. If you can email either of the email addresses that have been shared, then we'll get back to you quickly and promptly. Do we want to move on to amendments and agreements before we, I suspect, get on to the main chunk of the questions that I suspect are all on capitals? So there's one here about can we amend agreements to alter to facilitate capital items? For example, the length of a hedgerow being withdrawn from the management standard in order for it to get laid. So do we know the answer to that one? Alice, Richard? That's Caroline Hurdley at 7:24.
Hi, Sandy. Yeah, Alice here from the RPA. So you shouldn't need to remove the length of hedgerow from your SFI pilot agreement. In order to apply for the hedge laying option, you'll need to have management control of both sides of the hedge, and that's explained in the supplement that Sandy was talking about earlier. So the hedgerow was able to be included in your SFI pilot agreement if it had gaps within it where you would need to do some laying. So you shouldn't need to remove it. I hope that helps answer that.
Thank you, Alice. Richard's asked, he's got agreements that started on the 1st of February but may sell one parcel before the end of the first agreement year. Should that be removed before the amendment period? And if so, how? Would I be paid for that parcel for the year, even though it's not under my management for the full year. Alice, is that another one that we can pick up? That's Richard Wharton at 7:26.
Sorry, I'm trying to type answers and trying to multitask. I'm not turning my camera on because I've been told my sound isn't that great, so apologies. I am in the depths of rural Herefordshire and I have slightly dodgy rural broadband, so apologies. Right, so Richard, you've got an agreement starting 1st of February, but you may sell one parcel before the end of the first agreement year. Should that be removed before the amendment period? So Richard, that's what we call a change of circumstances. And what you need to do is you need to drop an email to us at the RPA and let us know if that happens. And then we evaluate change of circumstances on a case-by-case basis. So yes, you would need to let us know because you will have lost management control of that land, which is an eligibility requirement for it to be in your SFI pilot agreement. So if that is going to happen, then drop us a line on email and then we can look at it.
Thank you, Alice. Richard, hopefully that was helpful. I think I haven't spotted any others that are about amendments to agreements. Suggest we then move on to a majority of the questions which are around capital items. Let's start with Neil Ridge, which is the top of the Q&A. There doesn't appear to be any capital items to support rotational grazing, which is the key to the standards. We had this one yesterday. Richard, do you want to pick up this?
Yep, I can do. My name's, hopefully people can see and hear me. My computer's a little bit slow, but my name's Richard Littleton and I work for DEFRA. So I can see a few people have posted this comment with regards to the requirement for temporary electric fencing. And yes, that is not part of the initial SFI pilot capital offer. We have offered the permanent electric fencing, but if semi-permanent electric fencing is something that people would require. And I think this first question is about, there's no mains electric, so they would need a solar energizer. That is something we could look at, but as we said, it's based on the Countryside Stewardship capital offer. And in Countryside Stewardship, I think mains electric fencing is the only option. So it's not something we could address quickly, but we could look at what the options are. But there is no, at the moment, there is no option for anything other than mains electric fencing.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks.
Richard, do you want to pick up the next one as well, which is Patrick Claxon, 7:14. So my read is that the hedge capital items are only allowed if you pick the hedge options.
That's right, yeah. So the capital items for all of the standards are listed against the relevant standards. So the items that are against the hedgerow standard are the capital items for that one. I can see that he's mentioned it makes no sense because hedgerow trees are good for carbon capture and everyone should be allowed to apply for these. On that point, trees are available also in the woodland standard, but the pilot offer is items that support delivery of the actions in the standard. So although I can see that hedgerows may be good for carbon capture, the reason we've linked the capital items to the standards is because they help to deliver the actions within them. So that's why hedgerow trees aren't in all the standards, because they're not directly applicable to the benefits of the actions in the standard. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard. We've got a question on stone wall grants not available in the pilot.
Yep, I can answer that one. I think, at the moment, we don't have a dry stone wall standard in the pilot. So as a result, there's no, in the pilot, there's no dry stone wall capital options, but a dry stone wall standard is something that we are potentially considering for the future. And as we develop the dry stone wall standard and look to pilot it, we would then also, link in the relevant dry stone wall capital options. But as there is no dry stone wall standard, there are no dry stone wall capital options at the moment, but it is something we're considering for the future.
Thank you, Richard.
Is the next one capital as well?
I think if we can pick up the the second one that Patrick's put down, which is 720. Capital items, if this is part of the package to replace PPS schemes, need to make capital items available every year so the farmer can get an annual income.
Okay, yeah. Well, one of the last point there is this being changed. We are definitely looking at new ways to deliver capital through SFI. So although we are, reusing countryside stewardship items and payment rates and systems at the moment, we are looking at new ways to deliver capital to make it potentially more flexible and tie in with some of the points that Patrick has raised there. So although I can't confirm that the plan would be to change our approach to capital, we are looking at how we can make it more flexible as we move away from previous schemes into our new domestic schemes.
Thank you.
The next one, 720 from, I think it's Green Farm, Kent. Again, I can see that somebody needs funding to take the mains electric to the field to enable the mobile grazing. With regards to how do we work to get more capital items to support that, I'm not 100% sure. I do know in the current, I think in countryside stewardship and in SFI, we don't actually have grants to, extend the mains electricity to the fields. So if there's a different route to that, it might be separate funding is available somewhere else. But again, all I could say from an SFI point of view is we could look at that question, but it's not something that's currently covered in the SFI, or indeed, I don't think the countryside stewardship capital offer.
Thank you. I think, John, what's the next one? So that's, is hedge laying banking plus protective fencing eligible for capital works? I think, Pete, I think if it's listed within the standard that sits within your agreement, then actually it will be, and if it doesn't, then I'm afraid it wouldn't be. I think you need to look at the standards that sit and what capital items are available under those standards.
Yeah, I mean, hedgerow laying is definitely one of the capital items, and the fencing to support hedgerows is also in there. So following on from what you say, Sandy, probably Pete, if you double check the standard page in the capital item, and again, if you think there's anything key missing, we'd welcome that feedback to the email address on the slideshow.
Yeah, brilliant. So I think Rose has got quite a specific question in there. I think, Rose, if it's okay, if you can email that across to the email address that we've put in, I think we'll get you an answer on that one, because I think we just need to read that one and just understand it a little bit better. Neil Carter at 723. Capital FG1 and FG2 listed under a number of the standards and in the information online is put into group water quality. Does that mean if we're only involved in the hedgerow standard? Actually, Richard.
No, the answer to that one is no. If you're in the hedgerow standard, fencing is available to support hedgerows as well. So you would be eligible to apply for those items. Although I know it says water quality, but we have those items listed as eligible for the hedgerow standards, so you can use those items to protect hedgerows.
Thank you, Richard. Richard, can we look at the next one as well, which is anonymous 725 around capital grants for wood and not metal fencing?
I think this one's around the field gate, and I would have to double check. Oh no, that's okay. I think I'll have to double check the item. I can maybe do that in a second. I'll go off the camera, or I'll go off and check. But I think at the moment, wooden gates are the only capital item available. But for fencing, the rules have been updated, so some metal fencing options are available.
Thank you. Christine and Richard have asked, fencing FG2 sheet netting 4.9, £4.90 a metre funding up to 100 metres. What does that mean?
Is that from Christine and Richard? Let me double check.
It's at 727.
I think, Sandy, I'll come in, Richard, correct me if I'm wrong. It's Alice again here. On gov.uk, it lists things in categories. So it's in a category of up to £100. that's not a limit on how much funding you can apply for. There are lots of capital items that are listed like that. So it's grouping them together on gov.uk, which can be a little bit confusing.
Thank you, Alice.
That's my interpretation as well, Alice. Thank you.
Thank you. Kate asked, why did she have to remove a land parcel from the SFI agreement when it has a current CS Capital only option for tracks? It's not affecting the land within the parcel, only a capital option.
I can answer this one, Sandy.
Thanks,
So
Richard.
thank you for your point, Kate. And this is something that we've received several times, and we are looking at this one as well as part of the as part of the work to make sure that we could deliver SFI and make it as simple as possible in the pilot. We did take an initial decision that anything with an existing agri-environment agreement on it was not eligible for the SFI pilot for simplicity and as part of the initial setting up of the scheme. But I do appreciate the points that you've made there. There are some capital items inside land parcels that would not potentially impact the SFI scheme. So we are looking at potentially expanding eligibility as we speak for land parcels that do have just the capital agreements on them, but we do need to work that through before we can come to a final point on that. But we have received that question several times, so thank you for that.
And Richard, can we pick up Patrick's feedback on the hedgerow standards and hedgerow trees? That's coming across quite loudly in the Q&A.
Capital items, hedgerows. Okay.
732.
All right. Okay, let me go to that one. Most farmers I know are not entering the hedgerow standard as it is not commercial, but hedgerow trees are important. Please, can you revisit? Okay, I don't know if that question's about they're not entering the hedgerow standard because it's not commercially viable or it's not a commercial hedgerow. I'm not really sure what the framing of the question is, but we do totally agree that hedgerows are very important. They're important for biodiversity, carbon capture and habitat. So we do understand the importance of hedgerows, but perhaps Patrick might be an idea to put a little bit more context and email the shared mailbox that we'll provide, and we can look into that in more detail.
So actually, what I'd suggest for Patrick, if he emails me directly, my email's in the chat, then we can pick up a conversation, Patrick, because as I say, this is about learning. It would be good to get your insights in terms of what we can do differently as a result of that. Karen's put a question around absence of tracks that she suggested that she'd like an answer to. I'm going to find her original question. Actually, Richard, do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, I think if we're talking about the livestock and machinery tracks capital item, that was initially planned to be part of the standards, but I did put a comment earlier. One of the things that we did was, again, for simplicity, once we first launched the pilot and launched the capital, was to remove anything that required advisor guidance or advisor input. So, for example, catchment sensitive farming officer approval or Natural England advisor sign off, and the livestock and machinery tracks fell into that category. So they were removed from the initial pilot offering. But again, it is something that we've received quite a lot of feedback on. And throughout the pilot, we'll be looking to revisit that and investigate if we can expand the the amount of items available to cover off things that usually require guidance and advice. But that's why it was removed initially. Thanks.
Thank you. We've got a question from Elsteer about 739 capital. Is there any funding for in-field standalone trees or copses, or just larger scale woodland creation?
In the SFI pilot, and Melanie, please come in if I get anything wrong here, but in the pilot, we're looking for, well, the funding is available to expand woodland up to 0.1 hectares to create new woodland, but with regards to standalone trees in fields, the funding available is to help fence them off and maintain the under canopy area. So the capital for in-field standalone trees is for ones that are already there to fence them off and protect them. With regards to planting new trees, that falls under the woodland on-farm woodland standard, and it's up to 0.1 hectares of new tree planting. Thanks.
That is correct, Richard. Just to say, it's up to 0.5 hectares, not
All right.
0.1 of woodland expansion, but otherwise completely good.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, both. I think there's quite a few still on capital items that are coming through, aren't they?
Let's have a look. I'll go through there. I can have a quick look through the capital ones to see if there's any. Okay, there was one from an anonymous attendee at 7:38 asking about capital grants for robotic weeding or weeders. And I can see that one of my colleagues is typing an answer to that one. So I'll wait until Louise has answered that one, but I can come in with further detail if needed. Is there anything else? We talked about cow tracks, dry stone walling. Okay, I'll answer one from Patrick at 7:34 around capital items being we've been told that everything's from countryside stewardship and can't be changed. That was the position initially, to get the pilot up and running and get a capital offer available to pilot participants to reuse what is already there. But throughout the pilot, we are looking to change that if we can, and look for new ways to deliver capital, and look for potentially new capital items to add to the pilot as it progresses. So again, would be more than happy to receive any suggestions that people might have for things that aren't in countryside stewardship or available in the other grant programs that people think would be suitable for SFI as the pilot progresses, and indeed as the main scheme rolls out. So it's an initial position that we've been reusing countryside stewardship, but we are open to look to new ways to deliver. Thank you.
So, Julie, we're dealing with that particular issue, aren't we? So I will come back out to you shortly once we've had that deliberation. So Julie's asking about a transition from HLS into SFI. We're dealing with that at the moment. We've only got a couple of more minutes left, so any last minute spots from anyone from the team that may be useful to answer?
From Green Farm Kent at 7:42, I do know that there are some funding schemes for educational activity, but they're not included in the SFI pilot. So again, I think we could probably reply to that one separately. So I think there are grants available, but it's not through the SFI scheme, SFI pilot, sorry.
Brilliant, thank you. So Kate, at 7:44, if I can have a SFI agreement on parcels in a CS mid-tier, can you apply for CS management options in 22 on SFI pilot land? 7:44. So this is this concept of stacking. Alice, Lisa, do we know the answer to that one?
Yeah, I'll attempt to answer that one, Sandy. So for the SFI pilot, you weren't able to enter CS land parcels into a pilot agreement, and clearly we've announced the plans in December for being able, or looking to facilitate wherever possible, being able to enter CS option land into an SFI agreement. As far as I'm aware at the moment, there isn't any intention, and Richard, you may know more also, there isn't any intention that we would be looking to review the position at the moment with regard to the pilot, but it's certainly something that is on the radar, because we know it's been very frustrating for people to understand whether they could put CS land into the pilot or not. But at the moment, the position is CS land is not eligible for the pilot.
Yes, that's right, Alice. That's how it is at the moment, and we will potentially revisit that, but that's exactly the rules as we stand. And then I think I can see one that I could probably quickly answer from, I think it's Fedora Morris at 7:44 about questions around introducing an orchard standard and supporting capital items. So we did publish an announcement on gov.uk, I think it was in December. So currently the Orchard standard is potentially planned for piloting, I think, from 2024 and introduction into the live service from 2025. I would need to double check that, and that's a tentative timeline, but we did provide that is in the SFI 2022 publication in December, and that actually gives a full timeline of our plan for both the pilot and live service standards. So again, probably after this call, we could maybe provide the link to that, Sandy, but there is a bit in there that signposts throughout the pilot and live service when we plan to introduce the different standards. And I think a few people have asked about different standards, so that might be a useful link to share. Thanks.
So Liz is going to keep me honest, and apologies, we've slightly overrun our time slot. I wanted to thank everyone for coming along this evening. I'm hoping you found that useful. Just a couple of final reflections from me. Just wanted to thank you for your time and attention this evening. When we close this, there will be a short survey when you leave the webinar. I'd be really grateful if you could complete it. These things are new to us in the way that we're doing things, and we're learning as we go along. So any feedback that you can provide, we'd be really, really grateful. There's a lot of questions that's been raised over the last couple of sessions. So what we're going to do is take all of that insight and then think about what we then need to do differently as a result of the questions that you've posed and the answers that we've given. What we've also started doing is we've created an online forum for the pilot participants, which we are gradually rolling out, and I've seen some chats already for some people beginning to talk to one another in terms of their own circumstances and how they're engaging in the pilot. My email address for those people that weren't able to see it in the chat, I'm going to be brave enough to say it out loud. It's Sandy, which is SANDY .Capilla, which is KAPILA @rpa.gov.uk. So please feel free to reach out to me or the email address that has been put into the Q&A. Thank you for your time this evening. Thank you, panel members, for responding to so many questions. Thank you again for your ongoing support and efforts to help us shape future farming. And have a good evening.